A listener production.
Hi, Natarsha Belling with you and welcome to the afternoon edition of The Briefing. Coming up in our deep dive, the bombshell decision by the RBA to leave rates on hold. The majority of financial experts were tipping a cut and the move has taken many, including millions of mortgage holders, by surprise. So what's next? We'll unpack all the details and the latest predictions regarding interest rates in just a moment. But first, let's check the afternoon headlines this Wednesday, the 9th of July. Federal Treasurer Jim Chalmers says the Trump administration's proposed new 200% tariff on Australian pharmaceuticals is, quote, very concerning. Mr. Trump imposed a group of new tariffs overnight, also including a 50% tax on our copper, which is set to be a massive setback for our mining giants, including BHP. Mr. Chalmers telling the ABC Australia is urgently seeking clarification.
We'll work through the announcement out of the US overnight. They're obviously very concerning developments. We are talking about billions of dollars of exports to the US when it comes to pharmaceuticals.
QANTAS has revealed more details about a major cyber attack with the accounts of an estimated 5.7 million customers compromised. It's believed specific data that's been stolen varies between customers, but addresses, birthdays and phone numbers are among the information that's been accessed after one of its call centres overseas was hit by the cyber attack at the end of last month. Here is QANTAS CEO Vanessa Hudson.
No financial data has been compromised, no passport information, no credit card information, no frequent flyer password or PIN numbers have been breached.
The airline is now contacting affected customers. And Penny Wong is refusing to confirm or deny reports she was one of a number of foreign ministers targeted in a major AI scam that was impersonating the US Secretary of State Marco Rubio. The Washington Post is reporting the scammer sent fake texts and also voice messages to the foreign ministers pretending to be Mr. Rubio with concerns they were trying to gain access to top secret information and accounts. The US State Department has confirmed it's now investigating. Now it's time to get into our deep dive with financial expert Sally Tindall from Canstar on the latest shock move by the RBA to keep the official cash rate on hold. So is it good or bad news? And what will the Reserve Bank do next? Sally, thanks so much for joining us. I think it was estimated 90% of the market, the experts had predicted a cut yesterday by the RBA. What happened?
Yeah, it was a bombshell hold, that's for certain. The RBA wants more time. They want more time to see the quarterly inflation results. They're not out till the 30th of July. In between, we get monthly results. They're only an indicator and it only measures part of the basket of goods. That's not good enough for the RBA. They've said we want to hold out for that extra bit of information to make sure that inflation is sustainably within the target band. Plenty of economists, we all got onto the bandwagon. We're excited by the monthly inflation data because even when looking at trimmed mean, which is underlying inflation, it was sitting at 2.4% in the latest monthly results. That's below the midpoint of the target band. Fantastic progress. But I do accept that the RBA wants that full basket of goods before making a move. The key for me was that the RBA said, it's not that they're debating the trajectory of the cash rate. The next move will be down, basically. It's just a matter of timing. The other thing I would mention is that hitting the pause button for the next 5 weeks gives the board extra time to understand the impact of the last two cuts on how it's filtering through to the economy, particularly households, because we know a lot of households are reinvesting that money back into their mortgage, and that has implications for the RBA. But also it gives them much valuable time to understand or better understand the implications of the Trump tariffs and the impact here in Australia, although I think from where we sit today, 5 weeks isn't going to be long enough.
Sally, in regards to the RBA and the board meeting, really interesting, as we all know, to see what Michelle Bullock, the governor, says afterwards. The devil's always in the detail in her statement. One of the quotes she made yesterday is, quote, "We don't want to end up having to fight inflation again. We want to make sure we've nailed it." And it's interesting when Michelle talks about inflation. She says, look, we don't have another cash rate cut, but the danger to households of out of control inflation cannot be underestimated. Can you unpack that for us?
Yeah, absolutely. We know how difficult it is to change people's mindsets and to change, inflation results. It's taken us 3 long years to get inflation, the inflation genie, partway back into the bottle. If we don't finish the job properly and screw that lid on tight shut, then inflation can run away again quite easily, and that will require more hikes and certainly less cuts to then get it back under control. It takes a lot to change the direction that we're all moving. And the big issue here is that inflation, high inflation, it hurts those on the lowest incomes the most, because that bottle of milk that you're buying, if you're buying it on a high income, it's a tiny proportion. If you're buying it on a low income, it's a lot bigger proportion of your salary.
100%. Now, we've seen the blame game already happen as early as, literally minutes after the RBA handed down their decision. The Federal Treasurer says this has all got to do with the constant uncertainty globally, internationally, especially with Mr. Trump's tariffs. Do you believe there's any truth to that? Because I've also heard a school of thought today that it has got a lot to do with our ballooning debt.
It's interesting. Back in the May meeting, the RBA chose to cut the cash rate. They did that after the central bank had done extensive modelling on the Trump tariffs, and they looked at, a good case alternative, but also the worst case alternative. And I think that alternative really shocked them to see how big an impact these Trump tariffs could potentially have on the economy. When they saw that was one of the reasons why they actually initiated a rate cut back in May. And it certainly was one of the reasons pushing them to consider a double cut. So I don't know that the argument holds up. Again, with Australia's debt problem, well, certainly Governor Bullock made it very clear yesterday that when you're looking at home loans, for example, property prices and levels of debt are not her problem. This is not something the board looks at. They're very specific about keeping prices in check, keeping Australians in jobs, and the economy ticking along. I think these 3 things are front of mind for Governor Bullock. The one thing I haven't mentioned is Australia's unemployment rate at 4.1%. It is pretty rock solid. It's been that way for a number of months now. And I do think that bought the RBA some time to keep the cash rate on hold for now until they meet again on the 11th and 12th of August.
Sally, talking about Mr. Trump, President Trump's tariffs, even, the last couple of hours, we've actually seen speculation that President Trump is set to whack these massive tariffs on pharmaceuticals here in Australia and also copper. The problem with the uncertainty is it's very difficult, I think, for the RBA or even the federal government right now to plan anything, because it seems to be this constant roller coaster ride and so many surprises from the Trump administration that affect us.
Absolutely, but I think we've come a long way in the last few months of understanding that it is a roller coaster and nothing is quite yet set in stone, certainly not from an initial tweet or an initial announcement. So the RBA is incredibly well placed to ride that roller coaster. They normally keep a cool, calm and collected head about things. So I do think that they're in a good position to block out the noise, understand what they should be looking at, do the modelling certainly, but understand that the worst case scenario is probably unlikely.
So in regards to what homeowners should do right now, if you have a mortgage, because every single time the cash rate is cut, it's a massive saving for around 3.3 million Australians who have a mortgage. What would your advice be to them right now?
Look, there's a lot of disappointed households out there, that's for certain. I would say channel that disappointment, channel that frustration, that anger even, channel it into getting yourself a better mortgage rate yourself. So do that by haggling with your bank. You can do that by switching to a lower rate lender. And the first thing you should do, because I know that this isn't front of mind for everyone, but find out what your interest rate is right now. If you don't know, you can look up it in your banking app. You can look it up online, work out what your rate is and hold it up in the mirror and really face it. Are you below or above average when it comes to that mortgage rate? So for an owner-occupier paying down their debt, the average Australian is paying 5.80%. This is one time you want to be well below average. So understand also that there are 35 different lenders on our database that are offering at least one variable rate under 5.5%. What a great stretch target. Maybe pin it up on your fridge and aim for that. You've got 5 weeks before the RBA next meets. If you can refinance or haggle down to a much more competitive rate, and then the RBA, and you stay on a variable rate, and then the RBA comes through with a rate cut, you've effectively secured yourself a double cut.
So for people trying to get on that really, really difficult and super expensive property ladder, sometimes the negative of a cash rate cut is the fact that it just fuels the already hot property market. What are your thoughts right now or advice to people trying to get in to buy their first apartment or home?
Yeah, cut out the noise, essentially, because I know that a rate cut yesterday would have increased someone's maximum borrowing capacity, someone on the average wage, by about $12,000. Well, that's not a huge boost, so don't feel like you've missed out. But also, when the cash rate gets cut, it does, as you say, fuel the property market. And the biggest winner out of those cash rate cuts in the property game is typically someone selling the property, not buying it, because you'll find at a heated auction, more and more people are putting up their hands because their bank has said they could borrow more. You know, that's not a great strategy. So maybe use this time to understand exactly how much you're comfortable borrowing outside of any influence from the RBA. Don't go banking in a couple more cash rate cuts into your budget, into your property buying budget, because we just don't know what the future holds. But also, a mortgage is up to 30 years. You don't want to be basing a very big financial decision on the next couple of decisions from Governor Bullock and the rest of the board. You want to be doing it on something that you can actually manage come what may. I worked out on a 30-year mortgage, there's 240 RBA meetings in that 30-year time. There's at a guess, say 100 different changes. You need to be able to be prepared for every single one.
And the amount of money you pay in interest is mind-blowing. We really appreciate you joining us. Thanks, Sally.
Thanks for having me, Natasha.
That was financial expert Sally Tindall from Canstar. And that's it for this episode of the afternoon edition of The Briefing. We'd love you to subscribe or follow us on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast. And we'll be back in your feed tomorrow at 6 a.m. I'm Natasha Belling. Thanks for your company.